Thank you for coming, and I know that being in person is a big deal. So this is the first one. Susan Kirsch is here, and without Susan, I don't think I would be doing this in this way because of all of her help from Catalyst, and because this organization is one that she started many years ago, and it kind of got a little dormant, and I took over the website and started writing as Citizen Marin, and this is who I've collected. So, thank you very much. So do you want to say anything?
I would love to just say a couple of things of just how, one, it's so much fun to be walking into this room and looking around to see people who I remember either when I campaigned for the Board of Supervisors or people who used to sit around a table much. But I'm mostly standing just to say how much I appreciate what we have as a meeting and a relationship and a vision of what could happen, and that Amy is taking over not only this vision for Citizen Marin to do even more, but expanding that to be a Citizen California, which you might say more about or maybe not.
The state since 1969 has worked in 8-year cycles for housing, and the HCD, which is the Department of Community and Housing Development for California, has put together these numbers and then distributed them out through the state, and we get them through ABAG, which is because of the Bay Area. So this cycle, the 6th cycle, our numbers are insane, and everybody has noticed that. We went from being, we need 14,405 in the county right now, and I think we were at 2,298 for the last 8 years. So we're 7 times that for the county. But in most cities, the increase has been enormous. And when this first happened, it was noticed by cities, and there were a lot of appeals filed. And besides appeals, there was also a resolution that was passed around. So your city in Marin or somewhere through the state probably had the opportunity to sign a resolution wanting to keep local control of planning and the way that housing was going to be built and the way our neighborhoods were going to be and how our safety was going to be protected if we lived in high fire hazard zones. And of course those were all ignored, but they are on the record. And I have Mill Valleys on this table. And then after that there was an appeals process. And the appeals process was supposed to be based on changed conditions. So many appeals were filed. Many appeals were filed. The appeal for Mill Valley is on that table. It's about this thick. Took an incredible amount of research, and it's put together beautifully. The way that process went was every city went in ABAG. They went here, sat at a table, waited for days. It was their turn, 5 minutes. Okay, done. Nothing. No response. You're just, no, we refused. There was one appeal that was upheld because the Army Corps of Engineers said that a dam could break and kill 3,000 people. So they took those units and put them into the neighboring community. They refused to take them off of the list. Mm-hmm. They have refused so far to do anything that, in my mind, makes any sense at all. So when I first got involved in this, when I was thinking about fire a lot, we all know like 2020 was a big year. I started to see what was going on with housing, but then I was thinking, well, that can't possibly be affecting us because we have this, terrible situation here, and look, there's all these fires going. But it turned out in 2020, during those fires, Newsom vetoed a law that would have required evacuation access for these developments. Mm-hmm. And he said it could slow down the housing. Oh. And that was basically it for me. That was when I decided to just do this. So what has happened since that time is every city has been terrified of not having a compliant housing element. They are trying to cite an incredible number of units that they don't necessarily have the space for, they don't have the infrastructure for. As far as the infrastructure goes, unfunded mandates are unconstitutional in California, but because this was declared an emergency, the state has said that it's not an unfunded mandate because you can just raise some bonds or raise some taxes and pay for it. So that's what we're supposed to do. Even if you don't have a sewer system that's big enough, if you don't have schools that are large enough, whatever it takes, it's your responsibility. You will not be getting help from the state. They will be providing some grants. When they tell you they're giving you a $2 million grant, $2 million will buy you 2 units of housing. So when you're looking at, in Mill Valley, 865 units of housing, it's nothing. And when they take it to San Jose, where they need like 22,000 units of housing, it's even less. So there are constantly these headlines about these enormous grants and how they're funding all this housing, but they're doing nothing really. I mean, they're adding a pittance of what is required. So one thing that happened was there was a lot of notice. The Embarcadero Institute, Susan worked on this. The numbers were so bad that an audit was requested. And it was an emergency audit, which was authorized through Steve Glazier, who was a state senator, asked for the audit. The audit was approved. It went to the Department of, it went to actually the Auditor of California, and it was found that it was a disaster. The numbers weren't supported. They didn't have any methodology that could be repeated. They were sloppy. They weren't following Department of Finance numbers necessarily, and the Department of Finance numbers were off, and those needed to be adjusted. So they did nothing. HCD went, if you look on their website, yes, we see all these things, and they just check boxes that they've taken care of everything. But they have not taken care of any of it. So one thing that's occurring now is a push for a real audit, a full audit, and especially because we know what the numbers are now that we're going to grow. We're not growing by 7.5 million people in the next 8 years. We're growing by none. I mean, we have 38.99. We are expecting to have 40.16 million, and that's at 2045. But it, you know, in 2060, it's like 39 million. It's the same. And this isn't because of, you know, bad things here. It's because we're things that are happening. I track job losses, especially in tech, and it's like 35,000 jobs have been lost in the Bay Area in the last 2 years. If you're trying to move housing where jobs are, you're not really doing anyone a favor if you're moving them where jobs aren't, because most of this plan is supposed to, in the bigger scheme of things, create 15-minute cities where there's concentrated areas of population of infill inside every town to increase it by 15%, and then increase the amount of public transportation people use to get cars off the road. So we're supposed to live in these 15-minute cities where we take public transportation, and for some reason our jobs are there, and our kids can get to school there, or we can take a bike with our kids to school, and there is a store. But what if it's not the store you like? So that's, you know, kind of a lot of this is coming from that mindset. A lot of people that work with the HCD and give them the ideas that all this is created on, they are thinking about it as through climate, you know, some kind of like climate benefit, but building 2.5 million units is not a climate benefit to anyone. So that is still kind of blowing my mind.